5 spine-chilling wilderness hauntings revealed, terrifying tales of forbidden fear in the outdoors. The Thompsons drove into the heart of Pine Ridge National Forest, a place many locals murmured about but few dared to venture. This wasn't just any camping trip. Mark, Lisa, and their 12-year-old son Ethan sought a reset from their grinding lives. But behind every rustling leaf and echoing branch, something dark began to stir as they set up their tent beneath towering trees. Shadows flickered in the corner of their eyes. The sun dipped low, the forest's sweet scent of pine thickening with a sinister undertone. A frantic whisper seemed to trail them. Dread seeped in. Was it just the nighttime symphony of creatures, or something watching from the dense thickets? Ethan, his adventurous spirit ablaze, sprinted deeper into the woods, chasing a fleeting shadow. He returned breathless, clutching a small notebook, its cover grimed with time. "Look, Mom. I found this." His eyes sparkled. Lisa hesitated, then took it from him. Symbols adorned the page's strange, menacing runes that made her skin crawl. The laughter of the day faded, swallowed by an unsettling silence. "Maybe we should just roast marshmallows," Mark suggested, but the evening air buzzed with palpable tension, a feeling too heavy to shake off. Then, noise fractured the stillness, a distant cry that sent shivers down their spines. One of those late-night laughter echoes from who knows where. As they huddled around the fire, familiar faces emerged from the dark, the Johnsons, the friendly family they met at the camp entrance. But here, in the suffocating night, they looked anything but friendly. "Hey, can we join you?" Their smiles were wide, but their eyes held shadows. The Thompsons exchanged cautious glances. They laughed it off, unsure. But the laughter was cut short as low whispers sprawled around them, phrases electric with dread. "Old Pack's guardians of the woods," now, tension twisted tighter as paranoia nipped at their minds. Each shadow that danced beyond the trees felt alive, every sound a warning. The Thompsons were no longer simply desperate for an escape, their escape path flickered like a fragile flame. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Panic surged through their hearts as they instinctively clutched one another, their laughter reduced to stunted breaths. What if these familiar faces weren't friendly at all? Deep in the blackness, behind eyes obscured by darkness, they felt the weight of an unseen presence. A sudden rustling erupted through the bushes, causing them to jump. Figures lunged forward, shadows becoming threats. Their sanity spiraled into chaos, each whisper, echo, and cry suffocating their hope. Mark shouted, "What do you want?" The voice in response was low, guttural, "To save you from them." Dawn remained elusive, every corner of the woods felt like it held a secret, a curse woven into its history. The whispers hung in the air like tendrils of fog, settling on their skin, whispering a haunting question: would they ever escape the woods, or had they become a part of its terrified tale? The fire flickered, casting eerie shapes across the faces around it. Shadows stretched and shrank, making them look like grotesque caricatures of the people they were. Ethan's grin faded as he searched for comfort, but Mark and Lisa were lost in their own panic, eyes darting toward every crackle and whisper. When the Johnsons stepped closer, the smile on their faces grew unwelcome and wide, as if they fed off the fear. "What do you mean, from them?" Mark's voice trembled. He tried to mask his unease, but it slid beneath his skin like ice. The Johnsons exchanged glances, an understanding flaring between them. "They'll come tonight," Mrs. Johnson said, her voice almost a purr. "They're always hungry around this time." Ethan shivered, the notebook slipping from his fingers, forgotten on the forest floor. "Who? What are you talking about?" Lisa's eyes expanded, scanning for her son. It felt as if the very shadows had closed in tighter around them. A howl echoed through the trees, the sound primal and full of rage. It sent terrible vibrations through the ground, a chilling reminder that they were not alone. Mark instinctively moved closer to Lisa and Ethan, adrenaline sharp and ready, but a weight clamped down on them. The woods had turned into a claustrophobic cell. "What have we stumbled into?" he whispered, his voice low and frantic. "No one knows what they are," Mr. Johnson replied, his tone eerily calm. "They've been here long before us. They don't like outsiders." Ethan stepped back, wide-eyed, as his father gripped his shoulder. Reason fled as the feeling of being hunted crept into their bones. Shadows danced, weaving together like an unholy tapestry, drawing nearer with each passing breath. A sudden rustle just beyond their firelight sent them all spinning around, but there was nothing, only the trees standing sentinel and waiting, their intentions cloaked in darkness. "Stay with us," Mr. Johnson urged, as the remaining warmth from the fire flickered defiantly. A gust of wind dropped the temperature, drawing away the laughter, the smiles, everything that once felt safe. "When they come, don't look them in the eye. It's a pact. They want you." The whispering leaves carried voices now, chanting something incomprehensible and terrifying. The air vibrated with unholy promises, causing dread to crawl along their skin. Lisa shook her head, desperately attempting to fend off the encroaching madness. Mark squeezed Ethan's hand tighter, their hearts pounding like war drums. "We need to leave. Right now." But the figures surrounding them began to sway, casting grotesque silhouettes in the firelight. The Johnsons stepped back, their warm smiles vanishing, replaced by fear and something darker. "You can't leave," Mrs. Johnson croaked. "Not until the ritual is complete." More rustling erupted around them, so many sounds, shades of terror rising, closing in. "What ritual?" Mark's voice rose, thick with desperation. "What are you talking about?" Suddenly, an answering howl bellowed, more primal now, unyielding. It was like a warning, a clarion call through the trees. The Thompsons turned toward the sound, their eyes flaring wide. Shadows flickered and twisted, revealing gnarled figures barely visible in the dark. "He's coming," Ethan whimpered, trembling against his father. In that moment, from far beyond the tree line, a pair of glowing eyes pierced through the darkness, fixing onto them with an unearthly hunger. "Run!" Mark shouted, but before they could make a move, a net of shadow enveloped them, holding them in place, tightening. What awaited them now, they had no idea. But as the eyes drew nearer, one thing became clear: in this cursed forest, escape was a notion too naive to consider. What had they awakened? What came next would test the very limits of their souls. The shadows rushed in, tendrils of darkness wrapping around them like a vice. Ethan's heart thudded against his ribcage, each beat echoing the whispers slithering through the trees. The glowing eyes drew closer, pinpricks of malice splintering the night. It felt as though the forest, once majestic and alive, had become a living entity, eager to swallow them whole. "No, no, no," Ethan gasped, his grip on his father's hand tightening. Mark felt the boy's panic penetrate his own fear, a raw energy fueled by instinct to protect. "We have to get out. Stop squirming." Mrs. Johnson screeched, her voice laced with abrupt terror. She grabbed Ethan, pulling him close. Mark's guilt surged. They had trusted these people. Now, they were the puppeteers, and they danced on strings woven with dread. The air thickened, suffocating in its tension. The howling rolled closer, crafting an orchestra of despair. Mark turned frantically to Lisa. "We can break free. We just need to hurry." "Don't," hissed Mr. Johnson, then turned, his eyes wide, pupils dilated. "They'll take you if you show fear. You have to stand still." The ground beneath them pulsed, vibrating with an urgency that made Mark's stomach lurch. The shadows twisted into figures, grotesque and lashed with clashing movements, as if the forest were alive, shifting to reveal something worse, something lurking just beneath perception. "Listen to me," Mrs. Johnson said, too calmly as she squinted into the dark. You must offer one of your own when they arrive. It's the only way to stay safe. What? No. Mark spat back, heart racing. This was madness. Another howl, more deafening, echoed through the hollow branches. Something monstrous lurked beyond the fringes of their firelight, its presence drowning the very air around them. A bestial grunt filled the silence, followed by a scraping sound, claws dragging on bark. "Stand together," Mr. Johnson ordered, rallying them like a reluctant leader of a dying squad. "We will face it together." Lisa trembled, clutching Ethan, struggling against the suffocating coils of shadow. "What have we done?" she whispered, her voice crumbling under the weight of terror. They had unwittingly stepped into a labyrinth from which there was no escape. The glowing eyes suddenly multiplied, a swarm of deep hunger fluttering in the night. Each blink of those orbs sent waves of dread curling around them. They were coming closer. The figures materialized, shifting in and out of view, as if they were phantoms tied to the very essence of the cursed wood. "Hold on!" Mark yelled, just as something explosive broke through the tree line. It charged snarling, a monstrous body cascading with gnarled antlers and a howl that cleaved through the night air, splintering and wild. The grotesque creature lunged, and for a split second, it seemed time stood still, but Mark felt it an instinct, sharp as his fear. "Now!" he screamed, directing everyone to run. But the shadows began to whirl violently, clawing against them, threading fingers of darkness that conspired to pull them back. Ethan stumbled, eyes wide in terror as Mrs. Johnson turned toward the beast, eyes ablaze with something other than fear. Was it surrender? The forest sang in terror, blurring the lines of safety and the price of survival. Suddenly, a shriek pierced the night, a horrific sound that splintered their chance of escape. "Ethan!" Mark shouted, oblivion creeping in as shadows wove tighter around them. A path toward destruction lay ahead. Would they flee or confront the evil awakened in the woods? But just as they thought they could move forward, a deafening roar erupted. The creature was upon them, and everything they held dear was about to be consumed. What part of their lives would they sacrifice to find the way out? A choice loomed in the darkness, and it would demand more than they could give. Panic surged through Mark as he lunged for Ethan, the shadows writhing around him like live snakes, trying to ensnare them. "Run!" he screamed, his voice tearing from his throat like a primal howl, desperate and raw, but the shadows lashed out, pain erupting from his arm like flame. Mark fell, twisting to see the black tendrils curling around Ethan's legs, pulling him back. In that split second, terror clouded his judgment. He couldn't lose his son. "Ethan! No! Fight it!" Mark's voice broke, but the forest roared back, mocking his pleas. It was an entity of nightmares, and its hunger was insatiable. Behind them, the grotesque creature towered, fur bristling and breath steaming like a furnace stoked by dark fire. Its antlers jutted out like weapons of bone, glinting coldly in the moonlight. The glowing eyes flashed with predatory intent. Mark's heart raced, beating in sync with the monster's growls that threatened to rip the air apart. Mrs. Johnson's face twisted into an unnatural smile, a grimace almost. "You must let him go, Mark. It's the only way," she urged, her tone eerily calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "No!" he shouted, feeling the weight of horrific choices hang heavy in the air. "No! We can't sacrifice him." Lisa tightened her grip on Ethan, dragging him back as he kicked and flailed against the dark. The shadows stung his skin, a thousand tiny pricks, as if the forest itself was conspiring to tear them apart. "Do you see? It's not just a beast," Mr. Johnson shouted, looking at the creature like it held some strange reverence. "It's a judge. It will decide who lives and who dies." Ethan's eyes were wide as he glanced to his father, fear and confusion battling for dominance in his expression. "What does that mean?" His voice trembled. "We need to appease it," Mrs. Johnson insisted, her voice rising with panicked urgency. "It's the only way we can get out of this alive." Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want to give my son to that thing? Think. Mr. Johnson shouted, hopelessness etched in every line of his face. This is about survival. We all have to make sacrifices. Suddenly, the creature lunged forward into their midst, jaws snapping, snapping, snapping. The air filled with terror and the smell of that ancient wood, musky and damp. Mark felt the ground tremble beneath them, as if the whole forest was alive, thrumming with dark energy. He yanked at Ethan, pulling him backward. The shadows writhed around them, hot, suffocating, fighting with a ferocity that left him gasping. Stay close. Mark yelled, but doubt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Every heartbeat pounded with the weight of impossible choices. Then, eerily, the world around them seemed to still. Eyes blinked as if the very night was holding its breath. And from the depths, a voice rolled out a whisper, sinister and echoing. To survive, you must choose. Mark's breath hitched. The voice slithered into his mind, each word a needle of dread. Choose who will be offered. Ethan trembled, his eyes glossing over. Dad? No. No. Mark shouted again, but the air warped heavy, pulsating with foreboding. Shadows shifted ominously, pressing closer, insisting they pick someone to appease the creature's insatiable hunger. Guilt clawed at Mark's heart, and he felt the very ground consumed by despair. There were no good choices. The forest closed in as the howling rose again, mingling with the murmurs of those who had lost their way before, and then it hit him: the creature wasn't merely devouring them. It was laying claim to their darkest fears. It demanded more than flesh, it yearned for despair. Together, Mark heard himself murmur, glancing at his family. We can. But a scream shattered his resolve, a sound that rang out, echoing into the abyss, crisp and final. The shadows surged, hungry and guarding a terrible secret. Just then, they realized perhaps it wasn't a choice they made at all. Perhaps the forest had already chosen. As the anguished plea faded into silence, the monstrous form loomed closer, about to reveal a truth that would seal their fates and the price they would have to pay to escape. What terrifying revelations awaited them next? Mark's heart thundered in his chest as the creature loomed ever closer, its growls mingling with the chaotic rustle of leaves and the distant crackle of branches. Shadows twitched and warped, an amorphous mass weaving around them like an insatiable beast eager for its next meal. Mrs. Johnson's smile twisted grotesquely. Do it, Mark. Let him go. It's the only way. Her voice dripped with panic, and Mark could see the desperation etched in Mr. Johnson's eyes too. This was not some idle threat, it was their survival or a hellish end. Ethan whimpered as the tendrils tightened around his small frame. Mark felt the heat of his son's fear radiating between them, and it stung like a brand on his soul. Ethan. Just hold on. He shouted, willing his body to move past the terror binding him in place. But the shadows closed in, a living darkness that threatened to sow despair at every corner. The creature's breath rose like steam from a boiling pot, hot and rancid, punctuated with snapping jaws that tore through the stillness. Each snap felt like a message, a reminder of the darkness in this accursed forest. The lights flickered in the depths of its eyes, hungry and empty. Ethan's voice cracked, a thin thread that seemed to slice through the mounting hysteria. Dad, I'm scared. Mark swallowed hard, fighting the surge of helplessness. I want to let it take you. He promised, biting back tears. The shadows hissed, as though they understood his intentions. Opposing them would be futile, yet he held on to the slimmest flicker of hope. They had to find a way. Suddenly, the monster surged again, the ground vibrating with its movement. It leapt forward, and Mark stumbled backward, instinctively throwing himself in front of Ethan. The action drew gasps from those witnessing the horror unfold. He could feel the heat radiating from the beast, the hunger emanating from its twisted form. Make a choice. The voice slithered through the air once more, dark and disembodied. A taint of mockery colored its tone, sending frigid tendrils of fear racing down Mark's spine. The words sliced like ice. Mark shook his head violently, pushing against the gnawing dread. No. We will find a way out, together. But the shadows tightened around him, squeezing the words from his throat. Every moment felt like they could be consumed, like the forest was watching, waiting for him to break. Mrs. Johnson's frantic voice filled the air again. Please. We have to appease it. We have to do something. There was a wild desperation in her plea, a frantic energy that shifted the atmosphere. Behind her, the beast moved again, a predator poised to strike. Ethan's small hand clutched Mark's arm as if tethering him to this reality. I don't want to be alone, he whispered, voice quivering. The shadows twisted hungrily around them, closing in. Each pulsating beat of the creature's heart echoed in the air like a war drum. Time was running out. Mark turned, desperation clawing at him. Ethan, listen to me. We stick together. We're stronger that way. But inside, he battled waves of panic. What if staying together wasn't enough? The shadows retracted for a heartbeat, pulling back as if sensing a shift. Then they surged again, lashing at Mark's body, biting into his back mercilessly, and he fell to one knee, gasping against the assault. He struggled against the encroaching darkness. No. Was this what it meant to choose? To lose the one thing he cherished most? Mark. Mr. Johnson urged, a sob caught in his throat. We need to do it. Make the sacrifice. The absurdity of it all, the grotesque nature of the survival instinct, clawed at Mark's insides. No. He yelled, but doubt gnawed at his resolve. It was a sick choice, ugly and demeaning, but what other options did they have? Leaving Ethan was out of the question, but could they stand against the insatiable chaos? As he grappled for clarity, the monster's roar pierced his thoughts, drowning everything in its ferocity. Mark met Ethan's fearful gaze once more, and in that instant, he knew they were running out of time. But time for what? With a jolt, shadows surged, and one final, horrid realization fell upon them like a hammer. What if the darkest secrets of the forest were not meant to be escaped, but embraced? The air thickened, heavy with a palpable fear as the darkness closed in around them. A choice had to be made, but would it be salvation or damnation that awaited? Each heartbeat thrummed with uncertainty, setting the stage for a final confrontation. What awaited them as the churning shadows beckoned forth their darkest truths? Mark's breath came in ragged gasps, the putrid stench of the monster smothering him like a thick fog. The shadows flickered around them, pulsing with life, alive with insane hunger. They crept closer, coiling tighter around him and his son, each movement tugging at their sanity. Mark. Help me. Ethan's eyes glistened, wide with terror, and in that moment, Mark felt every ounce of his own resolve shatter against the monstrous weight of despair. He never thought they'd be here, caught between a sacrifice and survival, yet here they stood. Mrs. Johnson's frantic sobs clawed at him, twisting the emotions he fought to keep hidden. Mark, please. Her pleas morphed into a series of desperate breathless cries, spiraling into chaos. Do it. Do it now. Let him go, Mark. Mr. Johnson's voice trembled, but the meaning of his words hung in the air like a knife, sharp and unyielding. It seared into Mark's mind. What kind of monster would he become if he sacrificed his own son for survival? In his heart, he felt the shadows tugging at Ethan's small form, wrapping around him like a vine about to crush the very life from a fragile flower. Fear surged inside Mark, hot and unrelenting. This wasn't just a monstrous creature, it was an embodiment of every fear he had ever faced. Ethan. Mark roared, defiance surging within him. We are stronger than it. Remember what we talked about. For a moment, he saw the glimmer of hope in Ethan's eyes. A flicker of belief, but then darkness flooded back, the creature roaring again, shaking the trees around them. You think hope will save you? The voice whispered, smooth and oily. I am the hunger of despair, and you are just whispers lost in silence. Mark felt the shadows draw him in, a chilling grip on his throat. It felt like ice cutting into his skin. You don't have to listen. He screamed, heart racing. But his mind twisted in agony. What if they did have to listen? What if there truly was no escape? The ground shook violently, and Mark fought to remain standing. Ethan clutched his father's side, planting his feet like a brave little soldier facing a storm. But storm or not, Mark sensed the power slipping through his fingers. Every heartbeat echoed louder, drowning out the world until all that remained was the creature, the darkness, and the choices laid bare before them. Choose now. The voice urged, dripping with malice. The shadows reached out, sinister tendrils grazing Mark's skin, each caress a reminder of defeat. Suddenly, the air grew thick, warmer, as a bright light flickered somewhere deep within the forest. A pull. An unknown force. Mark's heart leaped. Could this be a way out? But with that glimmer came terror. What if it led to something worse? Nothing could be worse than the monster breathing down their neck. Mark! Mrs. Johnson's scream twisted into a strangled cry, and he looked back to see her grappling with the encroaching shadows, clawing at her throat as they threatened to swallow her whole. Mr. Johnson lunged for her, but the darkness wound around his feet like chains, dragging him down. In that moment, a choice pressed on Mark's chest to step forward into hope or succumb to despair. The shadows roared in anger, almost urging him away from the light, pulling and wrapping tighter. The light flickered again, more enticing. Was it their salvation, or a grand illusion crafted by the fear that ruled the forest? He felt Ethan's grip tighten, cold fingers wrapped around his arm. Dad, go to the light. His voice trembled, soaked in fear but laced with an unyielding belief in something. Anything. Mark swallowed hard, feeling the desperate weight of what lay before him. Would he choose hope where hope seemed lost? Would the darkness prevail? As the shadows rose in a frenzy, ready to consume them whole, Mark finally took a step toward the beckoning glow. But was it too late? And in the haze of darkness, the ground trembled, the voice of the forest whispering secrets Mark had yet to uncover, secrets that could either save them or seal their doom. Would they emerge from this nightmare, or would they become part of the shadows, forever lost in their grasp? The instant Mark stepped toward the light, the forest erupted with fury. Shadows slashed through the air like angry serpents, seeking to swallow him whole. The glow flickered, teasing him, promising safety just beyond the net of darkness. But as he moved, the creature's roar intensified, vibrating through Mark's bones. Dad! Ethan shouted, a note of desperation threading through his voice. Mark turned to see his son, eyes wide, his small body swallowed by chaotic shadows. Panic washed over him like icy water, numbing his limbs. Hold on tight. Mark yelled, pulling Ethan closer. He could feel the cold grip of despair tightening around them. The shadows writhed, moving as if they were alive, fighting to keep their prey. It was as if the very forest conspired against them, clawing at their last moments of hope. Don't let go. He felt the tremor in Ethan's fingers as they clutched his arm, fear radiating from him like a beacon. Keep moving, Mark. Go to the light. Mrs. Johnson's voice cut through the chaos, determination bleeding through her hysteria. At that moment, they rallied against the encroaching dark, the shared terror binding them in a vivid rush of survival instinct, but the moment was fleeting. The light dimmed, swirling shadows threatening to snuff it out for good. Behind them, Mr. Johnson was still entangled in the grasp of the darkness, a gasping figure swallowed by the grasping tendrils. Dad, what do we do? Ethan's voice cracked, urgency slicing deep into Mark's resolve. Stay with me. We can do this. Mark shouted back, voice straining under the weight of the beast's aura pressing down on them, heavy as a mountain. Each word was a lifeline, defiance against the darkness swirling around them. With each step forward, the pulsing shadows lashed out, maddened by their determination. Mark could feel them brush against his skin, the icy touch creeping under his shirt, chilling him to the bone. His pulse quickened, terrified of what would happen if he faltered. There was no room for doubt, no time for second-guessing. Mark pushed forward, the light growing brighter as they fought to reach it. In that clarity, something shifted. It was no longer just hopeful illumination. It felt alive, intelligent. It beckoned, promised reprieve, an escape from the nightmare that threatened to consume them, but then, as if sensing their progress, the shadows convulsed, surging toward them in an unholy frenzy. Mark felt the panic clawing at his throat. Did the creature sense their hope? Did it know they were coming for the light? Go! He screamed, shoving Ethan ahead. The boy stumbled, his footing wavering under the weight of the shadows. Mark's heart raced as he watched the darkness invade Ethan's space, tendrils curling like smoke around his legs. With a surge of strength, Mark lunged forward, hoisting Ethan up as if he could shield him from the inevitable. The shadows shrieked, boiling with rage as they fought against him, dragging the air thick with an onslaught of bitter despair. Suddenly, the flicker of the light turned into a radiant burst, illuminating the darkness. It was blinding, but amidst the brightness lay a chilling realization. This wasn't just a sanctuary, it pulsed with a hidden energy that was alien and powerful. Mark gasped, the weight of the shadows twisting around him. They surged into the light, where the warm glow met the icy tendrils. The collision sent a wave of disorienting energy, throwing him backward. Ethan cried out, teetering at the edge of the strange brightness. "Dad!" In an instant, everything froze. The world fell silent. The light flickered, vibrating between existence and oblivion. Before Mark could respond, shadows erupted, collapsing on them with a deafening roar, desperate to reclaim their glory, and amidst that chaos, a realization hit him hard. What if the light was just another trap? His heart thundered in his chest as he grasped Ethan's arm with both hands, ready to leap into the unknown, willing to brave whatever lay ahead. But just as he prepared to dive, that haunting voice echoed from the dark once more. "Choose wisely, Mark, or lose everything." And with that, Mark felt the threshold shift beneath him, leaving him breathless, suspended between light and shadow as he stared into the swirling chaos and the choice that could seal their fate. Would he plunge into the light, or turn back to face the darkness once more? The shadows clamored around them, frenzied tendrils reaching and curling, a dark storm desperate to reclaim its victims. Mark's heart raced as he weighed his choices. He glanced at Ethan. The boy's face was pale, eyes wide with sheer terror, trapped in a world teetering on the edge of two realities. "Ethan! Hold on tight!" Mark shouted, tightening his grip. The boy nodded, but his gaze flickered nervously to the encroaching darkness. The shadows hounded them, whispering promises of despair that reached for their minds as much as their bodies. With a burst of desperate energy, Mark summoned strength from within. "We have to go!" he cried. The light beckoned, swirling mysteriously, and for a moment, he thought he glimpsed a figure within, familiar yet ominous. Was it his imagination, or could he see someone waiting for them? "Step into the light!" the figure urged, its voice oddly melodic, almost soothing. But that very calmness sent chills racing down Mark's spine. Beneath the glittering surface lay something sinister. "No!" Mark bellowed, shaking his head wildly as if to scare the vision away. "We're not listening to you." The shadows writhed, roaring angrily at his defiance. Mark felt the air grow cold, a shiver creeping through him as he noticed dark shapes forming in the periphery, figures that looked all too human, faces twisted in agony, mouths stretching wide in silent screams. They were pulling at the very essence of his sanity, making it hard to think straight. "Dad! We can go, right?" Ethan's voice broke through the noise, desperation threading through it. Mark hesitated. The moment felt pregnant with danger, alive with unseen forces weighing against him. "We have to trust ourselves," he said, voice shaking. "We can't let the shadows win." The ground trembled beneath them. The light pulsed again, seductive and raw, a single, unyielding heartbeat. Mark dared to take a step forward, urging Ethan on. They inched closer, the warmth wrapping around them like an embrace as the shadows shrieked in defiance, but with every step, the dark echoed louder, desperate claws yawing at their backs, dragging along the earth with an angry hiss. "Mark, hurry!" Mrs. Johnson's voice pierced through it all, her frantic calls blending with the vicious snarls of the shadows. "Keep moving!" Mark cried, forcing his legs to propel them forward. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a towering mass, a grotesque figure sprouting from the very darkness around them. Its eyes, glowing like hellfire, centered on Mark and Ethan, and an icy wave swept through him. This was no mere illusion. "Join us," the figure hissed, its voice a thick blend of despair and temptation. "Stay forever never." Mark screamed, feeling a surge of anger boil within him, teetering on the brink of defiance or surrender. As if sensing his resolve, the figure lunged, its twisted limbs reaching across the space, extending beyond logic, beyond the realm of human perception. Mark's breath hitched as he felt the shadows close in, suffocating in thick. He was trapped in a whirlpool of despair, the light flickering like a dying star. Mark dug deep inside himself for courage. Then, with one mighty motion, he pushed forward, an act of sheer will. Ethan followed, clinging tightly. They raced towards the light, hearts pounding in unison as they felt the icy fingers of the shadows swipe at their heels. Just as the figure prepared to consume them, Mark reached for the light. It enveloped him in a searing blaze, a shocking contrast to the cold dread surrounding them. In that instant, everything shattered hard and unrelenting. The light pulsed violently, then dimmed, leaving them in a suffocating darkness again. Breathless and trembling, Mark instinctively grasped for Ethan, the boy's presence anchoring him against the tumultuous weight of the world. "Ethan, where are you?" Silence filled the air, stretching like an eternity. "Dad, I think," Ethan's voice wavered, rich with fear. "I think I lost something." Something shifted within Mark, an overwhelming dread creeping closer each second. The longing for safety crumbled under this new weight. "What did you lose?" he whispered, the shadow of panic clawing at him, but all that answered was the echoing pulse of darkness, and Mark realized, with dawning horror, that they might be more lost than he ever imagined. What had they left behind in the shadows? And would they find their way back, or had they just stepped deeper into a nightmarish lore no one could escape? Mark strained to hear anything through the dense fog of silence. The pulse of darkness throbbed around them, a living entity hungry for their fears, spinning tighter like a noose. "Ethan!" he called again, desperation slipping into his voice. "Dad, I can't see." Ethan's words trembled, barely a whisper. The shadows cocooned them, swallowing sound, light, hope. Mark felt the boy's grip loosen slightly, a sign of panic creeping in. "Hold on, buddy. Just breathe." Mark tried to sound confident, though his heart was pounding like a war drum, echoing his growing dread. He dropped to one knee, searching blindly for Ethan. "I'm right here. Just touch my hand." There it was, a small, warm hand clasped around his fingers. A small relief surged through him, but it was quickly snuffed out by the looming presence of the shadows swirling around, hungry for them both. Mark pulled Ethan close, trying to shield him from the unseen tormentors. As the oppressive darkness wrapped tighter, images flickered at the edges of Mark's vision, faces emerging momentarily from the dark, twisted and agony-racked as if they were trapped, begging for release. Each vision sent jolts of terror shooting through him. "We can't give in," he screamed into the void, but the only response was a disquieting silence and the sound of faint sobbing, layered beneath otherworldly whispers that mocked him. "Dad, what are they?" Ethan asked, his voice about to snap with fear. Their Mark hesitated, unsure how to frame what lay in the shadows. "They're just illusions. We're stronger than this, we just need to move." But the ground quaked beneath them, trembling as if the earth itself were reacting to their fears. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of horror that clawed at Mark's psyche, the sound prickling his skin. Mark's breathing quickened, the realization creeping in it wasn't just darkness they faced, it was alive, aware. Suddenly, the shadows surged, forming a grotesque visage that floated before them. "You brought him here," it hissed, its voice dripping with malice. The ghostly face bore a resemblance to someone Mark once knew. It was a memory twisted and turned. An old friend? An enemy? The torment of knowing lingered in the back of Mark's mind. "No," Mark gasped, shaking his head violently. "You don't get to take us. Join us." The figure beckoned, its eyes piercing into Mark, burrowing deep into his soul. Leave this pitiful existence behind. Come to the life that awaits in the shadows. Mark's heart raced, the grip on Ethan tightening as he felt the boy quiver beside him. We don't belong here. He shouted defiantly, each word carving a path through the deafening chaos. With those words, a brilliant flash erupted from within the shadows, blinding and raw. Mark shielded Ethan instinctively, but the light did not consume them. Instead, it pushed outward against the darkness, illuminating shapes twisting back and forth. Shadowy hands withdrew, howling in fury as the light surged, a chaotic ballet of fear and resistance. Ethan, we have to run. Mark yelled, gathering his courage. He pulled the boy to his feet, their feet pounding on the unyielding ground, the light guiding them vaguely forward, but the darkness fought back, clawing at them, whispering dark truths, hidden memories. You can't escape yourself, it murmured as unrelenting tendrils lashed out, grazing Mark's skin like icy fingers trapping him. Keep going. He urged, fear igniting every fiber of his being. They sprinted blindly until a sharp chill burst through the veil of light. Mark stumbled, grasping the air, the boy's small hands slipping from his grip. Ethan! Mark screamed, horror frozen in his veins. He turned, desperately searching for his son. Dad! Ethan's cry pierced through the malevolent cacophony. A silhouette danced within the shadows, reaching out, both familiar and frightening. Mark's stomach twisted, the same face, now grinning in the darkness, beckoned Ethan closer. No! Don't! Mark shouted, his voice throbbing with desperation, but it was too late. Ethan's figure flickered in and out of sight, slipping further into the grasp of the malevolent force. Mark lunged forward, terror clawing at his throat as he glimpsed his son vanish into the dark. What have you done? The shadows sneered, mocking his frantic attempts. The world spun in a violent whirlpool of despair as darkness swallowed everything whole, leaving him in a suffocating void. Alone, his heart pounded, shaking with anger and fear. I'll find you, Ethan. He yelled into the inky vastness, words echoing back at him, defiant, yet somehow weaker. In the emptiness, a new realization dawned, prickling the back of his mind. If the shadows toyed with time and space, what if he could use their game against them? With renewed determination coursing through him, Mark took a breath, squared his shoulders, and prepared to fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume not only his son's soul but his very own. Could he rescue Ethan from the depths of despair? Or had he already sacrificed too much, stepping into a nightmare with no way out? The darkness closed in tighter, an unyielding beast determined to consume everything in its path. Mark was alone, yet a fire burned within him, ignited by the fleeting image of Ethan. He couldn't let despair win. The shadows swirled, taunting him, whispering lies, but he focused on the flicker of light. Ethan! I'll come for you! He shouted, voice trembling yet fierce, refusing to let fear claim his last shred of hope. In this void, where time bent and twisted, memories surged through him, each one unveiling layers of his determination. Ethan's laughter, his first steps, the glow of admiration on his son's face. Those memories became his armor, propelling him forward. With vibrant resolve, Mark stepped into the darkness, unyielding against the encroaching shadows. He could hear faint cries, voices echoing through the night, each one tugging at the strings of his heart. But they were traps, deceptions layered in sorrow. The only truth was Ethan. The shadows pulsed rhythmically, weaving in and out like a living tapestry, hearts thrumming in sync with his pulse. You can't have him! Mark roared, charging deeper into the dark. The shadows screeched as if his words were blades turning against them. The mass before him shivered, a ripple of chaotic energy, a lurking maw waiting to devour. Suddenly, like a beacon, a shimmer of light emerged far beyond, flickering like a flickering candle. Ethan! Mark bellowed, racing toward the distant warmth. Each urgent footfall echoed against his hope, every breath drawn heavy in anticipation. Then, the first silhouette of a small figure flickered into view, ghostly and uncertain. Mark's heart soared, then plummeted. Ethan, I'm coming! But the moment froze in time as shadows reached out greedily, trying to ensnare him once more. "No!" he shouted, digging his heels into the ground as icy tendrils lashed against him. Marked by desperation, he pressed on, pushing through the layers of darkness, striving against their grip. Struggling against the fabric of despair, he whispered encouraging words into the void. "I won't let you down. We'll be free." Clarity enveloped him, reigniting a violent spark that erupted into raw determination. Suddenly, a howl of defiance rang from within the shadows. "Choose." The darkness roared, vibrating with fury and malicious glee. "Sacrifice your soul. Leave him behind." Mark halted for a heartbeat, catching a glimpse of Ethan, his boy, fighting off the shadows struggling to ensnare him. Rage surged through his veins, amplifying his resolve. "No. I choose love," he screamed, enunciating each word with a ferocity that shattered the darkness. "I will not abandon him." Light erupted from within, churning and battling fiercely against the tendrils encroaching upon him. It was a fierce, primal fire, a light forged from the purest love of a father. The shadows recoiled, shrieking in agony, but Mark pushed through the pain, racing toward Ethan. "Dad! Help!" Ethan cried, reaching out through the chaos. Mark's heart twisted painfully, and he sprang forward, closing the gap separating them. In a blur of motion, Mark ripped away the shadows gripping Ethan's limbs, but as their hands finally clasped together, a guttural growl resonated, vibrating through Mark's core. "By giving yourself to the light, you seal the pact." It roared, hatred seething within the shadows. "I choose my son." Mark bellowed, desperation transforming into sacred resolve. The light swirled, pulsating around them, enveloping both Ethan and Mark in its fierce embrace. Suddenly, everything blurred. The ancient forest trembled as if the ground itself recoiled from the triumphant beacon. Shadows screamed, recoiling from the luminescent figure radiating pure love, the father and son anchored together in an ocean where darkness once ruled. Caught in the eye of the storm, Mark felt the heat of his love searing through darkness, breaking the chains that bound them. "Together!" he screamed, and together they plunged into the radiant light, the rhythm of their hearts synchronized in a final surge of defiance. Then, a blinding flash, shadows erupted, writhing in agony, their true essence revealed. The forest faded into echoes, and with that, Mark felt himself being pulled through time and space, spiraled away from despair and darkness. That in an instant, they tumbled into a clearing, sunlight washing over them, warmth flooding Mark's heart. He blinked against the brightness, gasping as reality broke free of the shadows. "Ethan!" he cried, and tears filled his eyes as he grasped his son, holding him tightly, their bodies shaking. The haunting echoes of the forest faded, leaving behind only the sound of their breaths mingling in pure relief. Together, they stood, facing the towering trees that had once consumed them. Mark grasped Ethan's shoulders, staring deeply into his son's eyes, narrowed and bright. "Don't ever venture there again. Never forget." It was all so real. Ethan nodded, a flicker of understanding dawning across his young face. "I won't forget, Dad. I promise." Yet beneath their victory was a lingering shadow of unease, a reminder of the darkness that could reach for them again if they ever slipped too far from the light. With hands clasped tightly, they turned away from Pine Ridge National Forest, leaving its horror behind, but not its lesson. No matter how dark the night, love would always shine through in the depths of despair. As they walked away from the forest, alongside their path to freedom, a chilling wind whispered through the trees. Others may come, others who were drawn to its haunted depths, oblivious to the terror that lay in wait. But the Thompsons were free, forever changed, and fiercely devoted to keeping their light alive. And with every step they took, a flicker of hope ignited within them, reminding them of the sacred bond that kept darkness at bay. Listen up. If you loved this haunting tale, you need to subscribe now and become part of our community. This is the moment to show your support, so smash that like button to feed the algorithm and help us reach more adventurous souls. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. And flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. Let us hear your thoughts on this chilling adventure and what you think awaits next. Your voice matters.